All right, welcome back, everyone, to a really special interview we have today on the Asheville Vedic Astrology YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ryan's Vedic Astrology. I'm here today with an old friend and colleague, Shala Worsley of yogaandthecosmos.com. I've known Shala for quite a few years. We work together. She's the founder of the Asheville School of Massage and Yoga, and for many years, I helped her teaching how astrology relates to Ayurveda to her students. And Shayla's getting ready to do a really fascinating class at the Asheville Yoga Center. So we're going to talk about what's going on. And the theme of that is the planetary archetypes. So Shayla, thank you for being here today. It's really great to see you.
Oh, great to be with you, Ryan. Thanks for asking me. Fun to get a chance to talk.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be it's a really great theme. It's something I'm personally interested in, and I think more people should know about it. So before we dive right in, what is the actual name of the course that you will be teaching at Asheville Yoga Center?
Oh gosh, that's like a tough pop question because I think it's called Yoga and the Astrological Archetypes, or the Astrological Archetypes and Yoga. And the idea is that we can get to know these astrological archetypes individually, one by one, figure out what they are and how we can recognize them in our lives, and get a sense of when we might want to embody them through our yoga practices, when that would be helpful and how we can do it. So The name reflects that. I'm pretty sure it's Astrological Archetypes and Yoga.
I think you're right. And I don't think there are any other classes there that could be confused with that. So they should be able to find it on the Asheville Yoga Center website. So to lead into it, what are the planetary archetypes?
Yeah, great question. So the planetary archetypes are, archetypes are patterns of thought and behavior that are recurring and timeless and culturally universal. So planetary archetypes are a pattern of behavior or thought that's related to the symbol of each one of the planets. So from an evolutionary astrology perspective, each planet has either a core motivation of our human condition, like what is this human trying to do while it's on the planet, or a transcendent impulse to thrust us beyond just this typical human experience, to explore, to remember, and to reconnect what else is there besides this human experience. It's sort of related a little bit to the chakra system in that the lower chakras are really getting a healthy relationship with this human that we are. And the upper chakras are gaining a relationship or a remembrance or a reconnection with what is beyond the human. Right. And I see the planets like that. They're almost friends and guides. And if we recognize them, then we can have a stronger relationship with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess we should specify, whereas my main focus is Vedic astrology, yours is Western astrology, correct?
True.
Right, which is fine. And personally, I think that this idea of what you're describing with the planetary energies is the real astrology, and doesn't really matter whether it's Vedic or Western, or however you might label it. But what comes up for me is kind of the interesting idea that from the Vedic standpoint, relating it to chakras, we often see Saturn as the first chakra, related to the first chakra, and Mars to the third chakra, which are primary planets that relate to kind of our power to deal with the world and surviving the world and even thriving in the world. So I guess I'm kind of curious, from your tradition, are those similar?
Not exactly. From my tradition, the lower chakras, a little bit, I can see where Saturn could be first chakra, in that you're gaining a foundation. There's a structure, there's a foundation. But in my tradition, Saturn is more like the wise elder, the teacher that says, hey, don't get so absorbed in this particular aspect of being human. Let me bump you a little bit and show you where your soul really wants to grow. So it's kind of that transcendent impulse to move beyond the fixation with the human experience, through suffering. Honestly, Saturn, when I think of Saturn, I think of the beauty of the growth that comes from suffering, from being uncomfortable with something, from feeling like we're getting squeezed. And that squeeze is what motivates us to look beyond just this human experience. There's got to be something else here and deeper that I can rely on. So I always think of Saturn as giving a little nudge forward and beyond. Although, of course, it's about structure as well, creating structure in this life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that can bring up so many things. People always ask, why is there suffering in the world? And I think that you kind of touch upon it there. I know we're not answering that question, but you kind of touch upon it there. And that, one of the things that suffering does for us is kind of nudge us, push us to look beyond what's going on. Why can't I find a partner? Why can't I find a mate? Well, maybe it's because something's trying to push you beyond attachment to that kind of ideal. It's a hard thing to swallow, but I think it's important to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I feel like comes up every time Saturn squares or opposes Venus. If there's suffering in relationship or in lack of relationship, then it's pushing us to find a foundation that is in being rather than in this world. And when we can relax back into relating with being, then everything else is a cherry on top.
Yeah. And when you talk about that kind of conjunction or opposition or experience, are you talking about, like, say, for example, in transit, or are you talking about, say, for example, when Saturn is aspecting your natal Venus?
Both.
Yeah.
If it's aspecting a natal Venus, then I would expect it's a life theme, a real strong recurrent life theme. And if it's transiting, then it's just going to pop up at certain periods in life.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then.
But we kind of got off from the original topic. It's so fun to talk about all the things, but Mars is aligned. I think you and I are both of our systems of astrology see Mars in a similar way, that Mars would be the call to action and the courage to stand up. What is it that motivates us to stand up and fight for something? Where do we find our courage? What are we most passionate about? When we're connected with that feeling of passionate motivation to action, then Mars is with us.
Yeah.
And when we're disconnected from it and we're feeling insecure or a lack of motivation, then it's helpful to bring Mars energy into our life somehow. It's helpful to make friends with Mars somehow. And that's where the idea for this workshop came in.
Yeah. And we'll get back to that in just a moment, but you've just got me thinking about all different kinds of things. With the idea of Mars, that makes perfect sense. And one of the things I was taught, that when Mars is, for example, like in good dignity or well supported or somewhere where he can fulfill his agenda, that he will choose to fight, but fights that are worth fighting for. And that when Mars is not, he might not fight at all, or it might be the type of person that picks fights that aren't really worth it or just cause more problems.
Totally, which is why I think of astrology as a form of yoga, because yoga ultimately is a self-awareness that brings us back to a connection with our deepest self. And all of these planetary archetypes are operating in us. And if we're not aware of them, then they're the horses operating without us holding the reins. Just like you said, when Mars is operating, I might use the words in shadow, then our Mars could just be going off, just like quick to fire, but without a purpose, rage for no reason, that sort of thing. And so if we can become aware of Mars as an archetype, and then we can witness Mars in action, we slowly start to hold the reins, and then we can steer that Martian horse for good rather than for nothing, for naught.
Right. So we've sort of been getting into this, but like, if you could elaborate a little bit more with this idea of why ultimately is it important for people to understand these planetary archetypes? Like, so for their life experience, ultimately, why is it so important for them to understand this?
Yeah, for me, it's just about self-awareness and getting kinder quicker. And if we can understand the archetypes and we can witness them in action in our lives, coming forward through our mind, our thoughts, our emotions, our words, our actions, our interactions with others, when we can witness that and hold the reins and have a little bit more control over how those archetypes are manifesting in our lives, that's beautiful. We get kinder quicker. And at the same time, it's almost as if by looking at the archetypes, we start to peel them back. They get a little bit more transparent or translucent, and we can see through the archetypes to let a relationship with our deeper self come. I feel like until then, the archetypes are almost like running the show. They're in between us and our deeper self. And we have confusion or lack of clarity or disconnection from source or from self or being, presence, whatever you want to call it. So for me, a relationship with the planetary archetypes really is in service of a relationship with our deepest self. It enables us to have that relationship.
And so with this workshop that you're doing, I mean, it almost seems to me like you really don't even have to know a whole lot about astrology to do it, because you're just kind of diving right into a direct connection to these energies.
Absolutely. We're just going archetype by archetype. This first workshop is Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, just the first 5. And we'll look at them one at a time. We'll recognize moments in our life when we can look back in the past and say, oh, that was a really Martian period in my life, or that was very lunar, that was very solar. And then how and when might we want to cultivate a relationship with those archetypes in our lives? And how can we do that through yoga? Yes, that's what this first workshop is all about. And then from there, if people are interested in understanding how the archetypes operate through them in a more specific way, say through applying them to the zodiac and their natal chart, that's a deeper dive that can be fun done individually or in small groups, which is originally what I was doing before I brought this workshop to Asheville Yoga Center. During COVID, I've been doing this work in small groups over Zoom, just as a way to help people learn their own natal charts bit by bit, instead of one big 2 or 3 hour natal reading download. This is piece by piece. Let's make friends with one part at a time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, I find this so fascinating, because I've always thought to myself, we have these natal charts and we have these transits and things, but I always thought that if we understood how the planets function and how they are as representations of our own consciousness, we don't really need the natal chart, because we could, once we have the background information, which you're talking about providing here, we can say, all right, how is my Mars functioning? And then we can stop and we could think about it. And then we could decide, hopefully through some kind of system or aid from a guide, how can I work towards making that Mars more balanced or more harmonious with my experience?
I love that you say that. I still appreciate having the ephemeris as my date book with life. Not that I plan every meeting, action, or interaction on the ephemeris, but it's nice for me to know the astrological weather. When might there be a Martian period that I really want to pay attention to? When is the moon going to be really strong in me? This is going to be a ripe period for investigating XYZ.
Yeah. And
so not trying to put anybody out of a job.
No, because, people obviously still can benefit from looking at a chart and getting that general idea of what was the weather pattern when they were born. But like what you're describing, I mean, in my own experience, I kind of think that was the original astrology, and that we didn't have it such that we would do a 2-hour reading saying, tell me about me. We would say, okay, I would like to accomplish this or be in service in this way. Maybe it'd be a great time when Jupiter and Moon are in opposition and they're supporting each other in some way, or in trines, or maybe I have to do a hard work. I have to go to battle. So it might be good if there was Mars and Saturn impacting my 7th house, or things like that. It makes sense in the moment, because then it's more present based rather than trying to define ourselves by our astrological blueprint, I guess you could say. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. So I guess another question would be, what kind of activities help people have an experience? So we need to talk about 2 things. Number one, what kind of activities help people have an experience with these planetary archetypes? That would be the first one. And then if I remember, which hopefully I will, once you have that experience, what kind of things do you do to help cultivate, certain aspects of these planets? So number one, what kinds of activities help people have an experience with the archetypes?
Yeah. So life brings us the experience, right? I feel like life brings us, it's like the archetypes visit us. I think the old concept from maybe Greeks and Romans is that we get visitations by these beings, and these are the archetypal moods. They're the flavors, they're the compulsions that come over us, and they're immortal. These are the immortal gods. So life brings us the situations, but we can also go seeking them, and they're individual according to the planet. My interest, of course, is how can we enhance those through our yoga practice? But, for instance, we've been talking a lot about Mars. So if it's the desire to gain courage and will to act, it's going to be individual. What is it for you that motivates you and propels you to action? But certainly it could be getting your blood pumping and getting yourself ready for some type of let's go feeling. So what is going to give you a sense of strength and fortitude, and almost like you're a horse chomping at the bit, ready to act? For some people, it might be a wild dance session. And for some people, it might be climbing a big mountain. And for others, it could be something that's more intellectual, thinking of different placements of Mars in a person's chart. But through a yoga practice, we can use asana and pranayama, mudra, visualization to bring in some of the general qualities of Mars, no matter what zodiac sign your Mars might fall in. And we can just bring in a feeling of bold, strong, ready to act, move, quick, fast, heat. Just the key words of the archetype can help us to flavor a yoga practice.
Yeah. And that, that also kind of indicates that there really isn't, taking, for example, Mars or other planets, there could be a planet that we have difficulty with, but in the overall scheme of things, Mars is not a bad planet because we all need Mars for some reason. Like it's a part of us.
Yeah, we can't chop off our Mars. We all have a Mars. It's just better to get a good relationship with each one. So Mars is going to come up, or Mars is going to be in shadow and cause a perhaps like a fermentation that moves toward resentment or depression if we don't have a relationship with it. So it's better to know what's a healthy expression of each of these archetypes in our lives. And then how can I recognize when the archetype is either overdone or underdone? And I use the word shadow for that. So how can we recognize when it's in shadow and support a healthy expression?
Yeah. Well, so we've talked about Mars. Let's just pick another planet just for the sake of balance. And I would probably choose like Jupiter or Venus. So your choice of those two, if we're thinking about, learning how to have an experience of one of those two planets, how would that look?
So I think of Venus, when Venus is active in our lives, it's when we are, Stephen Forrest, an astrologer I love, says that Venus comes in as the exhalation after a stressful experience, that Venus is about savoring life and the enjoyment of life. So when our main motivation is, let me just kick back and enjoy and savor, then Venus is with us. Venus is with us when we seek to create beauty in our lives, to surround ourselves with beauty. And I also think of Venus as being the archetype of relating well, relating harmoniously. So balance and fairness and reciprocity, give and take, win-win scenarios, diplomacy, just healthy relating. All of those things, I think, are signs that Venus is ripe and active in our lives.
Yeah.
Is that true for you in the Vedic tradition?
Yeah. Well, I was kind of contemplating what you were saying while you were talking about it, and what you've described is very, very much in line with like my perception of this energy of Venus. But one thing I'd been taught one time was that, which brings up this interplay of the archetypes and the planetary energies, how you can't just have one. And what was shared with me was, if in order to have real happiness in life, you have to have Mars, because Mars is the hunger and the drive, but you have to have Venus to enjoy it once it's done. So if you get someone who has all Venus all the time, that's like someone who just has everything handed to them. And so they have no real enjoyment in life because there was no struggle to get there. Just like if you have all Mars, then it's all struggle and no fulfillment. So the idea of seeing how these planets balance each other, how, you appreciate a glass of water a lot more when you've just run 10 miles.
Yes.
But if you're just getting glasses of water all day long, well, it's no big deal. So,
that's a great example. Yeah.
Yeah. So that brings me to another question that's not on our list, I know. But maybe not in this workshop, but in general, or maybe it is this workshop, do you discuss sort of how each of the planets kind of also help to support each other, just sort of in the way we were describing here?
I think that conversation will come up very naturally. Right now, I'm thinking of this first workshop as almost learning the ABCs of each archetype. And then that workshop that you're describing next could be putting the letters into words or putting the words into sentences. But I think it'll come up organically. And it might come up around the conversation of how do we recognize when Venus is operating in shadow? And one of the ways that Venus is in shadow is lack of enjoyment, which would be like a sloth, a lethargy, an apathy, or a fuzzing out, numbing out, sort of escapism. And that's exactly what you're saying, the description of just like all water all the time. I've got all these glasses of water. What the heck do I want a glass of water for? No biggie. And so then how do we help Venus to become, to come out of the shadow? Then the question might be, what brings you joy? And then the next question there is, which of the archetypes, other planetary archetypes, can we bring in to support that finding of joy? And it might be Mars, go do something and earn the glass of water. Or it might be Jupiter. You mentioned Jupiter, and Jupiter's question is like, what's possible here? How can we expand? How can we go beyond? What can we explore that we haven't seen yet that will really light us up? So I love that as an idea for, in Jyotish, is it called the yoga, a yoga where you link planets together?
Yeah,
so we call them, the conjunction sextile. So the combination of the planets is a great next step in this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've just got one more question for you. And this seems to be sort of the real meat, the real gold of the workshop. So how does understanding these astrological archetypes, how do they help us with our personal growth?
Yeah. I think I'll refrain back to something that I said earlier, which to me, and it might be just my Sun conjunct Mars desire to get all the information out immediately. So I'm like, here's the thing that's most important to me. Let me say it right now. But I love it as an end cap, which is that we learn these archetypes in order to be friends with them so that they operate harmoniously, so that we can work with them rather than them ruling us. And in doing so, our life becomes more harmonious and more sattvic. And then we also get to look beyond, because before we have a friendly relationship with these archetypes, we're consumed by them and we're distracted by them. And it's hard to see through them and remember, hey, there's a deeper me, or from another perspective, there's an emptiness that's more important than what is here on this planet and in this life situation. So really it's transcendence that is the fundamental purpose of this work, but it's getting in there and really being with the nitty-gritty of this life in order to see through and remember a connection with something deeper.
So what does it mean to embody the archetype? What does it mean to let them into your life in that way?
Well, through a yoga practice, what it means to me is that when we're embodying an archetype, we are doing something, whether it's a yoga posture, an approach to a posture, a mudra, a mantra. We're doing something in order to create a cascade of sensations. There's this word bhavana, which means flavor, and it usually has to do with visualization. But the point of bhavana is to create a cascade of sensations that when they are in you, poof, it's like what we're talking about. The archetype comes alive in you and you have a felt sense of it in you. It's not something you're thinking about over there anymore. It has come to life in you. And then we have a relationship with it because we feel it, we know it, we are it for that moment. So embodying means to do anything, and in this case, a yoga practice that brings it to life with flavor. It's not just thinking about it. We don't have the thought, oh, this is what it means when Mercury is with me. But we actually feel a sharp attention. We feel an acuity of our sense perceptions. we feel our ability to discern this from that comes a little bit clearer. There are things that we can do. There are shapes of our body that we can take. There are mudras, there are mantras that bring each one of these planets alive in us in a really felt sense. That's what I mean by embodiment. Is that making sense?
Yeah. And the idea with it is you're talking about embodying it, bringing this felt sensation so that from there, you can actually act with it.
Exactly.
Right. So it's not like my guru or my astrologer told me to do a Mercury mantra. So I'm in a situation where I need Mercury. So I'm just going to sit here and chant the mantra. It's about, okay, I'm in a situation where I need to tap into Mercury. I'm going to use the mantra to bring that experience in, but then I'm going to actually act with that quality or that power of Mercury so that there is a possibility of real change actually happening.
Yes, absolutely. It's bringing it to life. It's having it be with you, in you, of you. And so that what we say and do as if it's as if that archetype is saying and doing the things instead of just, please be with me, Mercury, do this for me. It's more just like we invite the archetype to come in and we feel as if we are that and then act from there.
And this is you will be getting into this within the Planetary Archetype workshop. Is that true?
That's what it's all about. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, Shala's website is yogainthecosmos.com. And I was going to look it up, but I did not get a chance to. What are the dates of your workshop? Do you remember that off the top of your head?
You are so hard at pop quizzes. It's right around like January 20th, 21st. Right around, it's that weekend of January. So okay. It's 20, 21, 22, right around in there.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over to the Asheville Yoga Center website, and that's youryoga.com. Hopefully, does that sound right? Yes. Okay. And we have classes. Let's see.
It would be under 300 hour if there's a 300 hour or workshops or events, but
there's a 300 hour calendar.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go down, down, down. And there it is, Astrological Archetypes and Yoga, in person and virtual. So I think that's important to note. Good thing we looked this up. And it's listed as January 20th through 22nd, 2023.
Yes.
All right. So you can go to youryoga.com and find this to register. And I would highly advise, if you have an opportunity working with Shala. I've known Shala for several years, and of all the people I've known in this field, she always stands out to me as someone who's extremely thoughtful and thorough and dedicated and committed to her work. So I think anyone who's watching this could benefit from working with Shala. And I guess I'm assuming that you are able to do readings with people or sessions with people.
Yeah. And I do this work exactly what we're doing in the workshop. I can do one-on-one with people where we're applying it to their particular natal chart. So it gets more specific to their lives. So yes, please come to the workshop, but also contact me if you're interested in just doing one-on-one work with archetypes and yoga.
All right. Well, thank you for being with us today, Shala. It was really a pleasure.
Total pleasure. I love talking to you, Ryan. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we should do it again sometime because this whole conversation has just made me think of probably about 30 other questions.
Great. Yes, I would love it. When you asked me about doing this, you'd said you'd had a similar idea before, and I want to pick your brain and hear all your thoughts about it that you've been.
When we were doing classes at your, at the Asheville School of Massage and Yoga, that's when I first started this. And so, I actually did a series of videos called Yoga and the Mystic Path. And the whole idea was to, in a way, try to distill a little bit of these ideas. So yeah, we'll have to talk a little bit more about this in the future.
Sounds like there could be a collaboration.
That's what I was thinking.
I love it.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you for being with us. And again, you can go to yogainthecosmos.com to find Shala's website. And if you feel like joining this class, which I'd highly recommend, you can go to youryoga.com. And the 300-hour training, you can find the information there. So we'll see you all later. And it was wonderful to have you, Shala.
So great. Thanks, Ryan. Bye.